Dreamcast, the last video game console from Sega and one of the most beloved ones all over the world till today. And Russia isn't an exception. After its worldwide release in 1999, it came to Russia very quickly. Quite fast it took the place of the first PlayStation on the Russian video game market, but unfortunately its reign didn't last long. Certainly, Russian gamers played Dreamcast much longer than gamers in all the other countries did, but eventually PlayStation 2 won in Russia too. But thanks to the piracy on Dreamcast and delay of the PS2 hacking, we experienced Sega's masterpiece a little longer here in Russia than all of you aboard. Hello YouTube, my name is Victor and you are watching the Russian Video Game Comrade Show. Today it's time for another Russian bootleg console story, and as you already figured it out, it will be the story of Sega Dreamcast. As I've already told you, here in Russia almost nobody not only seen but not even heard about Sega Saturn. Most of the Russian gamers literally idolized Sega Genesis and knew there were Sega CD expansion and an affordable 3DO. Both of them were advertised by Sergei Suponev in the Dandy New Reality TV show. But the first and for the long time the only real CD-based console widely sold here in Russia was the first PlayStation. And then, in 1999, Sega, the company that made our favorite 16-bit console, released another great gaming machine that has beaten PS on all fronts. Yes, it took time for Sega to outsell the PlayStation in Russia, as in the end of the 90s, most of the Russian console gamers just purchased PS1 and the economical crisis of the 1998 made it almost impossible to buy another new console. But some did, and after the release of PS2 in the 2000s, Dreamcast became much cheaper, and there already were a lot of bootleg games for sale all over Russia, so a lot of gamers chose Dreamcast instead of the PS2 when they bought their new console. And this is how Sega's last console became the most popular console in Russia in the middle 2000s. The most interesting thing here is that we almost hadn't any TVS for the video games consoles back in the day. And for a long time, PC was the main gaming platform in Russia. I've already told you this in the previous episodes, but it's important to mention it once more today, as the dawn of the PC gaming in Russia came exactly in the early 2000s, when the Dreamcast was out. TV back then still was the main advertising platform for anything including video games. But if we speak about video games ads, there were almost none of them on Russian TV. My friend Stika recently made a great video on video game commercials across the world and showed a lot of interesting stuff in it. This video made me think about what we in Russia had back in the day on the TV. And I have to tell you that except Stifler's TV show Dandy New Reality and several other console-dedicated shows, we had almost no video games TV ads. If you could just turn on your TV and see a new video game or console ad during the commercial break among all the other ads, here in Russia we could see them mostly during the dedicated game shows, with just several exceptions. And secondly, most of the ads were just random Western ads with Russian voiceovers, for example like this Game Boy one.
Ты в школе, в дороге, на работе или отдыхе?
Тогда геймбой
Карманный.
со сменными картриджами, в которых сотни твоих любимых героев.
Геймбой никогда не надоест.
Уже сегодня в магазинах Денди по всей стране. Геймбой всегда с тобой.
In the early 90s there also were ordinary Stifler ads, but these were not too recent, and when Dandy New Reality show started its TV reign, most of the Stifler commercials migrated into the show. Some Stifler competitors released several different TV ads too, but these were so rare and odd, I doubt someone understood what they wanted to show and advertise even back then. And when I asked my friends about these ads, most of them didn't even remember seeing them. Just check it out yourself.
А я сказал Битман.
Игровые телевизионные компьютеры Bitman.
Could you realize this was a 16-bit Sega clone ad? What were they thinking when they made this? I really have a lot of questions. On the local TV channels you could also see bizarre ads of the local video game stores like this one.
Мальчик, ты чего плачешь?
Мне сказали, что где-то здесь находится магазин Дом Дэнди, а я его не могу найти.
Вон, видишь кинотеатр «Октябрь»? А вот улица Богдана Хмельницкого. А вот и магазин Дом Дэнди.
А у вас приставки есть?
Ха,
А джойстики? А картриджи?
В нашем магазине есть все. Магазин электронных развлечений «Дом Дэнди». Улица Богдана Хмельницкого, 3337. Работаем с 10 до 19, в воскресенье с 10 до 18 часов.
But basically it was it. No dedicated PlayStation ads, no dedicated Dreamcast ads, and so on. Only a lot of game review shows cloned from Stifler's Dandy New Reality. It's also important to mention that most of the TV game review shows back then covered only 8 and 16-bit games, and in the 2000s all of them were suspended. No, it wasn't the end of the video games on the Russian TV, a lot of new ones started, but 99% of these new ones were dedicated to PC games only. These were either PC Games Reviews show or PC Games competitions. Consoles were gone from the Russian TV and were only mentioned a little in the video game news on MTV Russia in the mid-2000s. But even there, all the focus was mostly on the PC games like elsewhere. If you were a console gamer, you could get your news only from word of mouth or video game magazines. There were a lot of video games magazines in Russia in the 2000s, but I have to say, despite all the actual information on the video games console there, most of the authors in these magazines were also blindly minded toxic PC gamers. For instance, check this out. It's a screenshot from the Russian magazine Video Games World Navigator from the year 2000. The line reads: Resident Evil Code Veronica, a new part of the popular Resident Evil series for the Dreamcast. Will the greedy Capcom make a PC version of it? It's a part of an article where the author compares PCs with different consoles and concludes that PCs are better than all of them. Yes, there were Russian magazines, or I'd better say authors in some magazines, that treated console games equally or even better than PCs. But in multi-platform ones, not entirely console magazines like official PlayStation. Yep, we had our own Russian version of the official PlayStation magazine, that even came with licensed demo CDs like all of you did. It was rather an exception. They were The Great Dragon, the magazine that started as Stifler's Video Ace Dandy, and Gameland. Despite the fact I've owned the PS1 back then and really loved its games, for the most of the time I was a PC gamer myself, and didn't read neither The Great Dragon nor the Gameland. My favorite one was Mega Game magazine, as it was really sick and had a lot of info on both Western and Russian PC games I never heard of. I bought official PlayStation and Gameland several times, but almost all of the hit games for the PS1 I saw there were displayed on the main showcase of every video game shop, and I didn't find anything new for me there. So I've decided that these periodicals were a waste of the money I could spend on the games themselves. And this was the reason I didn't see any previews of the Dreamcast, and they were printed at least in the Gameland magazine since May 1998, when Sega showed their new console in Japan. First time I saw something related to Dreamcast myself in the end of the 1999 at the IT exhibition in my hometown, St. Petersburg. And it even wasn't a Dreamcast itself. It was the opening CG movie of the Resident Evil Code Veronica game. Back then I already was a huge fan of Resident Evil. Hardly a month has passed since I played the new Resident Evil 3 game on my PlayStation, and that opening just blew my mind. I was loitering among different PC stands, and yes, that IT exhibition was also PC focused, and saw a large PC monitor with different games videos on it. And all of a sudden, Umbrella logo, 2 helicopters and a distant island appeared on it. I was immediately intrigued, and just several moments later I saw Claire Redfield. And not that sharp-aged Claire Redfield I knew, but the one I couldn't believe I would ever see. It seemed like a real movie and not a video game. Even the Final Fantasy VIII CG movies didn't look so good, and they already were mind-blowing that time. The chase scene that followed was so good, I just couldn't believe my eyes. And the most fun part is, I was the only one among my friends who saw it back then, and everyone just thought I made it up. To be honest, in just several months I already thought the same way myself, as I didn't see it anywhere else since then. And only a year later, in the year 2000, I finally saw the Dreamcast and Resident Evil Code Veronica game. Around the same time, all the video games shops start to sell Dreamcast and bootleg CDs, and the new Sega Legacy came to Russia. Since then, there weren't any TV ads needed. All the gamers already knew. There was a new Sega's console out there, and everyone wanted to own it. But not everyone could, and I was among those who couldn't. Thing is, my parents weren't poor and they could afford it. But they also weren't that rich, so they could just buy me anything I wanted. My father told me, "Son, you already have both the PlayStation and the PC. Don't you think it's a little too much to ask for another game? Isn't it already enough?" So I bought my own Dreamcast already in the era of the PS3 and Xbox 360. When I started to collect video games and consoles, and back then I had only one full game session on it that lasted for a whole day. We will be back to this story in a moment. As usual, I want to try to compare the influence of every video game console in Russia with other countries. And despite it's really great to have an opportunity to get any information on the internet today, I prefer to ask a real person who was there at the time to share his point of view on the question. So today I asked Mike from Retro Gamer Boy YouTube channel to take part in my video and tell us how the things were with the Dreamcast in Great Britain and maybe in Europe too. Mike is a Sega addicted video blogger. Plus, he's a game developer who worked on several really big games such as The Getaway, For Honor and Mafia Definitive Edition. Hello Mike, it's great to have you here today. Please tell me and our viewers how big the Dreamcast was in Great Britain.
Hi Victor, well how popular was the Sega Dreamcast in the UK? Well, to understand that we need to go all the way back to the Master System and Sega Mega Drive. Both those consoles had a huge amount of success in the UK. They were two of the biggest consoles, outselling Nintendo's Nintendo Entertainment System and the SNES. Sega really was the brand, the gaming brand for the UK. But unfortunately, with the disaster of the Sega Saturn, a lot of Sega's loyal fans ended up moving over to the PlayStation 1. And so when it came time to move to Sega's new console, the Sega Dreamcast, a large amount of their fan base had already left and were now sitting on a PlayStation 2. But the UK did remain the largest country for sales of the Sega Dreamcast within Europe. It's just unfortunately those sales weren't very high.
Here in Russia, Dreamcast sales were really huge. But unfortunately for Sega, this was only the console sales, as all the games were bootleg, and I don't really remember at least one original Dreamcast CD on the shelves of the Russian stores. Unlike PlayStation 2, by the way. I think that PlayStation 2 may even be the first console that had at least some game sales in Russia. Most of the PS2 games in St. Petersburg were also bootleg. But I not only saw the authentic ones with my own eyes in big stores, for example in MediaMarkt that came to Russia in the 2000s, but I also remember the experience visiting Moscow somewhere around 2005, where there were mostly licensed PS2 games in the stores. The sellers told me that almost no one in Moscow sold bootleg PS2 games publicly, as Sony cooperated with the police and it was the first time piracy really started to be chased in Russia, well, in Moscow. And the fun fact, a lot of people in Moscow started buying original Xbox back then, as Microsoft didn't take any legal actions on bootleg Xbox CDs, and these were all around in Moscow. But in my native town, St. Petersburg, most of the guys didn't even know about Xbox. But this is the story of the late 2000s, and maybe we will cover it sometime later. After all, today we're here for the Dreamcast. I watched your game room video and saw that you have just several Dreamcast games in your collection. You're not a Dreamcast fan yourself? Are you more a Mega Drive person?
So Victor's right, I do have a very small Dreamcast collection, especially when compared to my Mega Drive collection with over 400 games, my Master System collection which has 100 games in it, and any of my other collections, probably the Dreamcast is the smallest. Now it wasn't always this way, I did have a lot more Dreamcast games, but I sold them over time to buy other games for other consoles. Now I was a Dreamcast fan, I loved the Dreamcast, I loved the games on the Dreamcast. It's just that they stopped making games for it, they stopped supporting it, and so other consoles, other games took their place.
I also don't have a lot of authentic Dreamcast games myself, and most of the ones I have are Japanese ones. Some of them are region-locked exclusives, and I'm really a Japanese games fan myself, so I try to buy the games for my collection if I like them, even when my walkthrough was made on an emulator with the Universal Game Translator. My Japanese is really bad, and it's such a great thing we can play the region-locked games with the help of at least a machine translator. On the other hand, I have a lot of Russian bootleg games from the time these were sold everywhere. I never played these ones, as most of them are badly translated to Russian, and I've already shown you the quality of Russian bootleg translations in the early episodes, so I mostly keep this as a part of history and the material for my YouTube videos. This is the standard Dreamcast media that was sold in Russia. In fact, this is the second standard batch, as all the first ones were just burned CDRs that needed an Utopia boot disc to play. And yes, that ones were also sold in our stores like it's nothing special. I'm not sure, but it's almost a 100% chance that there also were factory press CDs that didn't boot without Utopia, but unfortunately I don't have even one. All of mine are already from the later times when it became available to make a self-boot bootleg CD for the Dreamcast. Here, take a look. This one is one of the first such CDs. It even has a proud sign here. Doesn't require a boot CD. One more interesting thing about the Dreamcast piracy is that unlike every other bootleg games, especially CD or DVD-R ones that really wear out your console laser faster, Dreamcast bootleg discs helped your console to live longer. Dreamcast used its own disc format, GD-ROM, and of course all the bootleg games were released on ordinary CDs. This caused worse video and sound quality, as pirates had to re-encode all the heavyweight stuff in the games to fit it on a 700 MB CD instead of a 1 GB GD-ROM. Sometimes Russian pirates even removed all the videos from the games, especially to make multi-game CDs. Yes, these still were a thing. And sometimes some games couldn't even be released on the bootleg media, as the pirates couldn't split the original GD-ROMs to burn them on CDs. For example, there were no pirated versions of D2 you could run on a real Dreamcast. I'm not sure if it still remains unpirated for the original console, but for a long time it was. So, despite all the difficulties, pirated CDs were much easier for the consoles to read compared to the GD-ROM. So the console's laser stayed fine much longer when you used them. In fact, the only Dreamcast I have now has a worn-out laser and couldn't read any original Dreamcast games. And all the bootleg games are still played on it without any problem. Mystery? Well, kinda. And what was the situation with import and bootleg Dreamcast games in your country, Mike?
So bootleg games in the UK is a really interesting subject and a short-lived one as well. The game console came out in 1999 in the UK, and the hacker group Utopia actually stole the SDK, the Sega SDK, for the Dreamcast in 1999 as well. So the UK audience were coming into this brand new console generation with a console that had already been hacked. So you could pick up bootleg games just a few months after the console had been released. But saying that, it didn't really pick up. Most of the people that had a Dreamcast were Sega diehards, and they were there to support the console. They wanted the original games, the manuals, the booklets, the CDs. They wanted all of those to be original. So there weren't many people out there bootlegging the Dreamcast. However, when it was announced that the Dreamcast would discontinue, this is when we had a spike in bootlegging. People would buy the consoles at a cheaper price because retailers were trying to get rid of them, and then they'd go away, do all the modifications, and buy catalogues and catalogues of these bootleg games. But even that didn't last long because people were starting to pick up the original games cheaply. Stores were selling off the games as cheap as they could to get rid of the stock to make space for new PlayStation 2 games to sit on the shelf. And so you could pick up brand new games for the cost of a bootleg game. Added to that, people were selling off their entire Dreamcast collections because there was no longer any support for it. And so you could pick up second-hand games that were in great condition for your Dreamcast and build out an original Dreamcast collection without having to bootleg it. And so the bootleg community never really took off in the UK for the Dreamcast. The PlayStation 1, however, was a completely different story. The PlayStation had a huge bootlegging community here in the UK.
I wish I could go back there and buy some original Dreamcast games for the price of the bootleg ones. Especially today when retro video game collecting is becoming more and more unaffordable each month. It's really great to hear that people in the UK understood the necessity of supporting the game developers and the platform owners back then. Here in Russia, people for a long time didn't understand that if you won't pay for the games, the developers will simply go bankrupt and won't make new games, sequels to our favorite games, and interesting new projects would also simply not see the light of the release. Fortunately, the approach, "I don't give a damn, these are just some kids' toys I can get for free, why the hell should I pay for it?" is slowly becoming a thing of the past, and every year more and more players in Russia start buying licensed products. Yes, piracy still exists in Russia, especially outside the big cities. In some distant places, people in Russia can still have $150 a month salary, so they don't even think of buying any games. But still, I see a huge difference compared to what happened in our country 20 years ago. Didn't you by accident develop any Dreamcast games, or only PlayStation ones?
So I joined Sony PlayStation about 6 months after the Dreamcast came out. I loved both of these machines, but as an artist in the games development community, the thing that I really liked was the Dreamcast games. Those guys had so much extra RAM to play around with it, and the textures on the Dreamcast just looked amazing. A lot of us developing games on the PlayStation 2 were really envious of what developers on Sega's Dreamcast had to play with. Now, seeing Sega drop out of the hardware business was a real shock to us in PlayStation. This was a developer that had created some of the most iconic hardware and best games ever seen. Now, whilst this meant less competition for us, we had just lost one of the biggest console developers of all times, one of the most successful console developers. And losing that competition, well, that meant we lost inspiration, we lost a challenger, we lost someone that would push us further. And at the time, some people were worried that this could mean a drop in the games industry and console manufacturing as a whole. Would PlayStation also see a drop in sales? Would Nintendo follow Sega? Well, none of that came to be, and actually gaming and game consoles actually grew bigger and better as they went on. But still, it was a big loss for the games industry.
And how long was the Dreamcast reign in Great Britain? Cause here in Russia it was huge till I think mid-2000s, even when the PS2 was long out.
So the Dreamcast died pretty quickly as soon as Sega announced that we're discontinuing it. PlayStation had such a huge presence by this time in the UK that the Dreamcast just couldn't compete. I remember going into shops just before they announced that they were going to stop making the Dreamcast in the UK and saw that Sega were packaging DVD players with the Dreamcast in an effort to try compete with the PlayStation 2. But it just couldn't compete. Sega had lost most of their followers during the Sega Saturn time, a lot of them moving over to PlayStation with the PlayStation 1. And so trying to get those back for the Dreamcast, even though the Dreamcast was an absolutely stunning machine, the visuals in it were amazing, especially when compared to the PlayStation 2, even though they had all of that, they'd lost that loyal user base and they'd moved over to PlayStation. Now, Dreamcast continued to live on in fans' eyes, and in fact there's a really strong Dreamcast community here in the UK, collecting the original games and even developing and trying to create new games for the Dreamcast. But in terms of the bigger gaming audience in the UK playing Dreamcast games, it pretty much died maybe 6 to 8 months after the Dreamcast was announced that it was discontinuing.
Once again, here in Russia, the official discountation of the Dreamcast wasn't the motive for Russian sellers to stop selling it and the players to buy it. Quite the opposite. It meant that the console itself became cheaper, and most of the guys who wanted to buy it for a long time but didn't have an opportunity now had a chance. A lot of people sold their PlayStation 1 and got a Dreamcast. PS2 was still expensive, and the Dreamcast had a lot of new games that those who owned a PS1 or an old PC still didn't play. And the Russian pirates continued to release a lot of region-locked games no one had seen here before. Yes, either with loosey translations or without the translation whatsoever. But as I've already told in the episode about Russian Sega games we had on our channel, by the way, if you, my beloved viewers, didn't see it, check it out. I'll leave the link in the description. Russians had a lot of experience playing a lot of Famicom Japanese-only bootleg games on Dendy, and the bootleg games for Dreamcast cost in Russia around $1. So everyone just continued to buy anything that was released and worked nicely. For instance, do you know how many Resident Evil games were released on the Dreamcast? Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3 and Resident Evil Code Veronica. Right? Wrong. Here in Russia we also had another Dreamcast exclusive. Resident Evil 7 Mansions. Yes, it wasn't a Resident Evil game. It was a Japanese game Nanatsu no Hikan Senritsu no Bishou, but it looked and played like Resident Evil, so our pirates decided to name it Resident Evil to sell more copies. And this is only one example. They were really resourceful in this, and it really helped Dreamcast to live a lot longer in Russia than it did anywhere else. By the way, if anyone is interested in the Nanatsu no Hikan, there is a fan English translation patch for it in the internet now. The game isn't great, but quite fun and can entertain the original Resident Evil fan who missed it.
Thank you, Victor, for having me on the channel to talk about the Dreamcast in the UK, an amazing console that had a short life cycle. I can't wait to be back on the channel, and maybe we can talk about some of the games that I made for PlayStation, Ubisoft and 2K.
I'll be honest, I am very interested myself in making a video about the games you developed. I hope you'll be interested to participate in this one sometime. Thank you. One of my mates from the university had a Dreamcast. If I remember it right, he got it around 2001. And as soon as I found it out, I asked him to lend me it for a couple days, as I really was a Resident Evil fan and had to play Code Veronica. I don't really remember why, but he could only give it to me for 1 day strictly. And also, he didn't have a Code Veronica disc. Why did he even buy a Dreamcast if he didn't want Code Veronica? This is how I got my first and only bootleg Dreamcast game that I really bought in the store. All the ones I have now I mostly got from my YouTube subscribers. I saved some money, went to a store, got Resident Evil and landed the Dreamcast for 1 day. I played hell of it, but unfortunately I couldn't finish all the game. Only disc 1 was beaten and I had to return the game console to its owner, but at least a part of my dream was fulfilled. I played the game I saw on the exhibition and then for quite a long time thought it wasn't even real. Pure gamers' happiness. Pirates also released movie CDs for the Dreamcast here in Russia, as they did for the first PlayStation. PS2 offered a DVD player, and Pirates offered to choose the cheaper way to watch the movies and play the games at the same time. Plus, all the movies for the Dreamcast, unlike DVDs in the early DVD period before a lot of cheap bootleg discs flooded the Russian market, were much cheaper. They were also sold for $1 or $2 depending on the quantity of the CDs the movie was fit in, and a lot of people bought and watched them. They've had a player, so why not? And this also helped the legacy of the Sega's last console to live in Russia much longer than anywhere in the world. Isn't that fascinating? Thank you for watching this episode. I really hope you liked it. Please press thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Have a nice day. Good luck!